And everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, I don't need your business. Thanks.
Rachel Zegler boldly proclaimed that she didn't need anyone's business, and the world listened. Her latest movie, live-action Snow White remake, flopped spectacularly. Colleagues remembered her insufferable behavior on set, and now she got herself blacklisted in Hollywood?
They had to hire a special media consultant for her to follow her around all the time and make sure she didn't continue shitting on Snow White and the prince and young love and women who want to get married and Steven Spielberg, the executive producer of her previous movie.
She was plucked out of obscurity by Steven Spielberg. All you say is thank you, Mr. Spielberg, and you keep saying that for the next 50 years because he made her.
I really hope her career is pretty much over. I'd be thrilled to see that. Behind the scenes, you guys know as well as I do that those executives like Spielberg are looking at that saying, Rachel Zegler can F right off.
If you're a studio, if you're a director, if you're a casting director, you've got to think twice or three times before hiring her.
When Rachel Zegler was cast as the lead in Spielberg's West Side Story remake, it was the kind of opportunity most young actresses would dream of. Spielberg, known for his ability to spot talent, had picked her out of relative obscurity. The press buzzed with excitement. The world was eager to see this new star shine. However, things didn't stay shiny for long. As filming went on, there were whispers on set. The actress who seemed so thankful for the opportunity started displaying behavior that caught many off guard.
Snacks all over the set that are apple flavored. And that hurts my feelings.
I was going to say,
it's like they don't know what happens to me. There's going to be so many stories that come from the set about how difficult I am to work with simply because I don't want apple.
Sources claim she became difficult to work with, challenging Spielberg's direction and even mocking his suggestions. What was initially seen as youthful exuberance started to feel like entitlement. Crew members began to dread working with her, and soon, she earned the nickname The Princess, not as a compliment, but as a sign of her growing arrogance. Spielberg, known for his patience, didn't immediately react. He tried to guide her, thinking her behavior could be a learning curve. But Rachel didn't take kindly to his advice, reportedly brushing it off as outdated. What was supposed to be her big break became a series of conflicts on set. Spielberg, the legendary director, seemed to realize that his star might not be the rising talent everyone thought. The tension on set continued to build, and the fallout from this began to show in the film's reception. But the trouble didn't stop there. Despite Spielberg's attempts to mentor Rachel Zegler, West Side Story's release became a turning point in her career. The movie received mixed reviews, but there were signs that the tension on set had impacted the final product. Many insiders pointed to her on-set behavior as a contributing factor to the film's underperformance. While the movie wasn't a complete flop, it didn't hit the heights everyone expected. The $100 million production ended with a box office take well below projections, leaving Disney and Spielberg disappointed. More troubling than the box office numbers, though, were the whispers that began circulating behind the scenes. Crew members described her as a diva, with one even claiming that she treated veteran actors and crew members with a shocking amount of disrespect. What was meant to be a shining moment for her career seemed to reveal a deeper problem: Rachel Zegler's growing reputation for being difficult. Her behavior and attitude made many question whether she truly understood the gravity of what Spielberg had given her, an opportunity that many would have given anything for. But as the film's production went on, it became clear that this was more than just growing pains. It was a pattern, and the industry began to take note, but things were about to get even worse for Zegler. Rachel Zegler's career continued its steep downward trajectory with the live-action Snow White remake. Originally seen as a fresh face to reinvigorate the Disney brand, Rachel's casting quickly became controversial. Her public comments about the movie and her approach to the classic character alienated longtime fans. In interviews, she mocked elements of the original Snow White and made it clear that her interpretation of the role would be vastly different. Her dismissive remarks about the beloved fairy tale, especially her jabs at the iconic Prince Charming, only intensified the backlash. Fans of the original story, along with Disney's core audience, felt betrayed. What was supposed to be a celebration of Disney's legacy turned into a divisive spectacle. The movie became a PR nightmare. While the film's failure at the box office was a glaring issue, it was Rachel's public persona that exacerbated the problem. She wasn't just a star of a failed project, she became the face of everything wrong with the film. And when it came time for the world to see the results, Rachel's attitude and behavior on Snow White would haunt her in ways she hadn't anticipated. What followed next? It wasn't just criticism, it was a full-blown career implosion. After the Snow White debacle, Rachel Zegler's name started to carry weight in Hollywood, just not the kind anyone would want. Insiders began to whisper that Steven Spielberg had quietly decided to distance himself from her. Once her biggest champion, he allegedly stopped recommending her for roles, and many industry professionals began to take his silence as a sign of disapproval. Spielberg's reputation in Hollywood is untouchable. If Spielberg turns his back on you, it sends a powerful message, and that's exactly what he seemed to have done. Sources claim that he had quietly blacklisted her, refusing to discuss her or work with her on future projects. His silence spoke volumes, especially in an industry where every move is watched carefully. While no official statement was made, insiders believe Spielberg had had enough of Rachel's attitude. What started as a dream role in West Side Story and later Snow White had turned into a series of missteps. Spielberg, known for guiding young talent, apparently realized too late that Rachel's potential wasn't enough to outweigh the chaos she brought to the set. The public and private fallout from both films signaled that Rachel Zegler's star was fading fast. But that wasn't all. Things got even worse behind the scenes. As the whispers grew louder, Rachel's career began to unravel at an alarming rate. Sources say that studios started pulling away from her. Projects she was once attached to were quietly canceled, and casting calls she had been invited to suddenly disappeared. Hollywood is a notoriously small world, and word spreads fast when someone's name is tainted. Her team reportedly scrambled to salvage her career. PR campaigns were launched, social media apologies made, and crisis meetings were held, but nothing seemed to stop the bleeding. Every time they tried to make a comeback, another scandal seemed to surface, pulling her deeper into the public's wrath. And the timing couldn't have been worse. As Disney was still reeling from the failure of Snow White, Zegler's name had become synonymous with failure. Her reputation was in tatters, and it seemed like no one was willing to risk their project on her. Hollywood, where second chances are rare, had no place for someone who had burned as many bridges as Rachel had. It wasn't just the press or fans who turned their backs on her. Her peers, too, began to distance themselves. Actors and directors, who once praised her talent, now avoided commenting on her. In Hollywood, silence is as telling as anything, and Zegler's isolation was growing with every passing day. But the story wasn't over yet. Something even bigger was on the horizon. As the public perception of Rachel Zegler deteriorated, so did her relationship with her fans. Once an exciting new talent, she quickly became a polarizing figure, often mocked on social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Critical memes flooded the internet, with many poking fun at her perceived arrogance and the disconnect between her public persona and the roles she had been handed. Her comments about Snow White were particularly damaging. In interviews, she belittled the original Disney classic and alienated not only the fans, but also the actors and filmmakers who had worked hard to build that legacy. The more she tried to justify her statements, the worse it seemed to get. Her attempts to recover from the backlash only deepened the divide, with fans and critics alike growing increasingly frustrated with her perceived lack of self-awareness. Even when she tried to apologize or smooth over the situation, her efforts were met with skepticism. Critics called her out for insincerity, and social media users mocked her for her attempts to play the victim. It was clear to everyone watching that Rachel Zegler's reputation was hanging by a thread, and this kind of public scrutiny was only amplifying her downfall. The more Rachel tried to control the narrative, the more it spiraled. The industry, which once celebrated her as the next big thing, now saw her as a cautionary tale of what happens when talent meets ego. But even with all the damage, something even more dramatic was about to unfold. When Snow White finally hit theaters, the expectations were sky high. Disney had invested a monumental amount into the remake, $270 million, and fans were excited to see Rachel Zegler's interpretation of the iconic character. But the end result was nothing short of disastrous. The film performed horribly at the box office, bringing in far less than expected. At a time when live-action remakes were usually guaranteed to make a solid profit, Snow White underperformed so badly, it became one of Disney's worst investments. It grossed just $194 million worldwide, a massive disappointment for a film with such a hefty price tag. While the film's failure could be attributed to several factors, poor reviews, a flawed script, and the backlash surrounding Rachel's casting, her behavior throughout the project and her involvement in the promotional interviews played a key role in its demise. Her dismissive comments about the original film, combined with the controversy surrounding her portrayal of Snow White, led many to view the movie through a lens of criticism before it even had a chance to succeed. The result? An embarrassing failure that not only hurt Disney's bottom line, but left Rachel Zegler with even more of a tarnished reputation in Hollywood. Producers began to panic. How could they have let this happen? And how could they possibly recover from this mess? This disaster wasn't just an isolated case. It had far-reaching consequences. The failure of Snow White didn't just lead to a PR nightmare. It effectively blacklisted Rachel Zegler in Hollywood. While she had been considered a rising star just a few years ago, now her name was associated with disaster. Studios, once eager to cast her, now took a step back. Hollywood is an industry where reputation means everything. And in the case of Zegler, it was becoming clear that her bad press was doing far more damage than her talent could repair. The alleged blacklisting started with whispers. Casting directors who had once eyed her for upcoming projects suddenly stopped reaching out. Directors who were previously interested in working with her began to look elsewhere. And as Spielberg's silence continued to send its message, Zegler's star continued to dim. No amount of public relations efforts could undo the harm she'd caused. Behind closed doors, studios quietly erased her from their plans. Even potential scripts that she had been attached to were canceled or shelved. Casting calls she'd once been included in mysteriously disappeared. The few projects that remained on her radar suddenly went silent. At the same time, her PR team struggled to repair her image. It was a race against time, but every attempt seemed to backfire. In Hollywood, no one could afford to be associated with a failing star. And that's exactly what Zegler had become. Someone with a tainted name who could ruin a project's reputation before it even started. And this wasn't the end of it. Hollywood had long memories, and soon enough, people would start looking at the bigger picture. What went wrong with Snow White and who was responsible? Rachel Zegler's continued fall from grace started to have a domino effect. Once studios began freezing her out, others followed suit. Hollywood works in a way where one bad reputation can quickly snowball into a career death sentence, and Zegler was feeling the weight of that truth. She found herself cut out of major projects, and without the same doors opening to her as they once did. Her team was reportedly scrambling to find a way out of this mess, trying to reinvent her image and rebuild her brand. But with each failed attempt, the situation grew worse. Her appearances on talk shows became cringe-worthy, with more jabs from interviewers about her past mistakes. She was no longer the fresh new face everyone was excited about. She had become the face of everything wrong with Hollywood's obsession with social media fame and unchecked egos. Even her fellow actors, once supportive, grew silent. The more she tried to make amends, the more her past mistakes came to light. Industry insiders began to view her as a liability, someone who could easily derail any project she was involved in. Studios now started actively avoiding working with her, out of fear that she would bring even more negative attention to their films. This snowball effect left Zegler isolated, desperate for a way to restore her career. But as the weeks and months passed, it became clear that Hollywood wasn't interested in giving her a second chance. The final blow to Rachel Zegler's career was allegedly Steven Spielberg's permanent disapproval. Known for his ability to spot and nurture talent, Spielberg had once placed all his trust in Zegler, believing she had the potential to be a superstar. But after her behavior on West Side Story and her subsequent fallout with Snow White, the legendary director reportedly decided that she wasn't worth the risk anymore. Spielberg's silence, while not a formal statement, spoke volumes. He didn't need to publicly criticize Zegler to make his position clear. In the world of Hollywood, Silence from someone of Spielberg's stature is often as impactful as a public dismissal. Insiders claimed that Spielberg made it known to his inner circle that he would never recommend Zegler for another project. He would never collaborate with her again. For someone like Spielberg, whose endorsement could propel an actor to A-list status, this kind of rejection was devastating. Hollywood's top producers and directors, who have long respected Spielberg's judgment, immediately took note. No one wanted to be the next person to back an actress whose career had been completely derailed. For Rachel, this was more than just one failed film. It was a total collapse, and the man who had given her a chance was now one of the most prominent figures making sure that her career would never recover. Now, with Spielberg's door closed, to her, Rachel Zegler's career in Hollywood appeared to be over. The dream had turned into a cautionary tale about the dangers of ego and entitlement in an industry that only gives so much leeway before it moves on.